used to think all those stories about the deep web and dark web were just urban legends wrapped in Reddit threads and horror podcasts. You know the kind. My friend's cousin's roommate saw something insane on a secret site type of stuff. I always rolled my eyes at it. That changed when one of my closest friends, Danny, told me she had actually been on there and seen stuff she wished she could forget. She was 28 at the time and not someone who spooked easily. She described some of what she found: weird, creepy sites and disturbing forums, but there were other things she flat out refused to talk about. She said it wasn't just disturbing, it was dangerous. Honestly, I should have just taken her word for it. But I guess my curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to prove to myself that it was all exaggerated, just internet folklore. So, I downloaded the Tor browser one night when I couldn't sleep and poked around the hidden wiki. I'd heard people warn that even just clicking random links could land you in serious trouble. Scams, viruses, way worse. And yeah, some of the links I clicked were sketchy, but mostly just dull. Adult classifieds, people advertising escorts, questionable pharmacies, black market stuff that honestly felt more like clickbait than real danger. It felt low effort and sort of lame. I was actually disappointed. But then I stumbled across something called The Night Watchman. The name stood out. It felt ominous, but vague. I thought maybe it was a creepypasta archive or someone live streaming night walks through eerie neighborhoods. Seemed harmless enough. I clicked it. The page that loaded was just black. No logo, nothing. Dead silent. Then 3 embedded videos appeared, stretched out horizontally across the screen. All were paused. Each showed a different person or group on the thumbnail. The first had a family of 4. A mom and dad, and 2 daughters who looked about 5 and 8, give or take. They were all sitting on a couch, smiling like they were posing for a Christmas card. The second showed a couple. The woman was very visibly pregnant, cradling her belly while leaning into the guy beside her. They looked happy. Nervous, but happy. The third was just a woman, probably in her mid-30s, sitting on the floor of her living room next to a black lab with an odd white patch over one eye. They looked cozy. Before I could even think about what the videos were, a voice cut in. Male, but weirdly garbled, like it had been passed through a dozen filters. I couldn't place an accent or even an age. He spoke slowly, deliberately. Good evening. Tonight, the Night Watchmen bring you 3 unique households, each with their own routines, dreams, and beliefs. Then he paused. I swear I could hear him smirking when he continued. Watch each video, and then choose one. That was it. No explanation, no instructions, just that. At this point, I wasn't sure what I'd gotten into, but my interest was fully locked in. I hovered for a second, then clicked on the first video. It played like some weirdly edited home movie. The family doing normal stuff. Watching cartoons in the living room, kids chasing each other in the yard, eating spaghetti around a cluttered dining table. Then the parents tucked the girls into bed and kissed them goodnight. It ended right after that. It felt wrong, like I was watching footage I was never supposed to see. There was no camera shake, no commentary, no visible source, just clean, silent clips strung together. It creeped me out, but I clicked the second one anyway. That one showed the couple, young, probably in their late 20s. They were putting together furniture in the nursery, making dumb jokes, holding up tiny onesies, and laughing. Later, they ate dinner. Kale and something else I couldn't identify. and flipped through parenting books together. Then they curled up on the couch before eventually heading off to bed, arms wrapped around each other. It was sweet. Honestly, sweet. I smiled without meaning to. But again, I felt like I was trespassing in the most intimate parts of someone's life. At that point, I figured I might as well see the last one. The third video opened on the woman and her dog, just the two of them. She honestly reminded me of some of my old roommates, the kind who always mean to clean but somehow never quite get around to it. Her apartment was cluttered in a very I live alone and don't care who sees this kind of way. There were dirty dishes stacked in the sink and on the counter, a mountain of unfolded laundry draped over the love seat. And her trash can was so full, the lid couldn't even close. The other two households had been relatively neat. The family had toys scattered around and a couple of mismatched socks in the hallway, but nothing wild. The couple's place was practically spotless, like one of those homes you see in Airbnb listings that makes you feel like your own place is a garbage fire. But this woman, she seemed lonely, not in a dramatic movie way, but in the quiet, everyday kind that sneaks up on you. Most of the video was just her flipping through channels, eating straight from a half-melted tub of cookies and cream ice cream, and checking her phone over and over, like she was hoping someone would text. At one point, she tossed a ball across the room for her dog, who was clearly the best part of her day, then fed him, scrolled her phone one last time, and headed to bed, still clutching it like it was her last link to the outside world. And then the screen shifted again. The same three paused images came back. The voice returned, distorted, but somehow smug this time. Now that you have seen, which one will you choose? I froze. For a second, I convinced myself it was just a messed up social experiment or some sort of creepy art project. I waited, hoping maybe there were other people watching who'd make the choice, but no one else did. After a long, sick silence, the three original videos vanished and were instantly replaced. These new videos felt different, wrong. They were all live feeds now, and each one showed a figure, tall, broad, unsettlingly still. I couldn't make out their faces, just that they were huge, all dressed the same. Black shirts, black pants, heavy boots, and long trench coats that flared slightly at their ankles. Like a horror movie version of a Western gang. Each wore a wide-brimmed black hat that shadowed their face. "Have you decided?" the voice asked again. "Which one will you choose?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. The next words hit like a gut punch. "Death comes on swift wings for our ill-fated friends. You must choose one. This is how the game goes." Game? Was this really happening? My hands hovered over my keyboard. I was ready to just exit the whole thing, clear the browser, delete the files, maybe even toss my laptop out the window. I reached to close it, but the voice calmly continued before I could even touch the screen. "Before you close us down, you should know that if you don't choose one of the three shown here, your family will be next." That made me pause. I laughed nervously at first. It had to be a bluff, right? Just a scare tactic. Mess with the viewer. Get them paranoid. And then it said my name. "Lena," it whispered, way too softly. "Lena. Dear sweet Lena." I stopped breathing. It knew my name. Not just my name, but how I went by it. Not my full name. Not the name listed on any forums. Just Lena. That's when the full panic kicked in. My chest felt tight. My palms were sweating. I didn't know what kind of sick joke this was, or if it was a joke at all anymore. "I know it's a difficult choice," the voice said again, almost gently this time. "But it must be made. Please direct the night watchmen to their chore." The screen flickered, and the original 3 clips came back. The family, the couple, the woman, and her dog. And now I realized they weren't just being watched. One of them was going to die, and I was supposed to choose. I tried to logic it out like that would make it any less horrible. Maybe this was just an elaborate trick, a horror-themed site trying to fake people out. But the fear in my body wasn't fake. My heart felt like it was going to punch through my ribs. The family. 2 little girls. No way I could do that. I wouldn't even consider it. The expecting couple. They were about to start a life. It felt evil even letting my mind wander in that direction. That left the woman. The one who lived alone, who ate ice cream for dinner, and whose only real companion seemed to be her dog. She had no kids, no partner. Her place was a mess. Yeah, but she didn't seem like a bad person. Just sad. And I hated myself for thinking it. But she did have the least to lose. The voice snapped again, this time louder and meaner. "Choose!" I flinched so hard I nearly knocked over my drink. I stared at the 3 images again, and I hated everything about what I was about to do. Then I clicked. I chose the woman. Very well, so it shall be. The voice had returned to that unsettling calm it had at the start. No distortion spikes, no edge, just cool, quiet authority. The night watchman feeds came back up on screen. Each figure stood stock still in front of the homes. "The choice has been made. You may proceed with your task." I stared wide-eyed as 2 of the dark-coated men stepped toward the homes on their respective screens. But the third one, the one posted in front of the lonely woman's apartment, turned the opposite way and calmly walked off into the darkness. His feed went static, then black. "What?" I literally said out loud. Wait, no, I chose her. What's happening?" But the video feeds shifted, and the remaining 2 screens suddenly filled my monitor, enlarging automatically. My heart was pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. The only words I could say over and over were, "What's going on?" I watched helplessly as the 2 remaining watchmen approached the houses. They didn't break in so much as move through them, like locks didn't matter. Doors gave way with barely a sound. The camera feeds followed them closely, almost like they were being filmed by invisible drones gliding silently behind them. The one entering the young couple's home crept through the hallway, glancing into the nursery. He didn't go in, though. He just paused and stared, as if admiring their effort. Then, he turned and crossed the hall, heading toward the main bedroom. The other watchman moved down a hallway lined with family photos and children's drawings taped to the walls. He slowed, paused between 2 doorways, and eventually turned into the kids' room. I don't know how I kept watching. I should have looked away. I should have pulled the plug right then. But I froze. The man by the couple's bed stood still for a beat, towering at the edge of their mattress. A giant blade clenched in one gloved hand. It looked like a machete, but larger, broader, heavier. Something meant to do damage fast. And then he stepped forward, calm as anything, and started swinging. The screams were so loud, I swear my ears rang. It didn't sound fake. There was no cheesy sound effect or background music. Just raw, primal terror. I whipped my head toward the other screen. The second watchman was now standing in the center of the kids' bedroom. The pink bunk bed was barely lit by a small nightlight. He reached back with a machete, his body casting a massive shadow against the wall. My throat clenched, and I screamed. Just this awful, panicked sound I didn't even know I could make. That's when I yanked the power cord out of my laptop. Not a soft shutdown. Not an "are you sure you want to exit?" Just a black screen, silence. No hum. No distorted voice. Nothing. I was shaking. My whole body felt frozen and boiling at the same time. I couldn't stop thinking, what had I just done? What was that? Was it real? Was any of it real? But it felt real. Too real. My lips were dry. My tongue felt like sandpaper. I just sat there on the floor in front of my dead laptop, trying not to pass out or throw up. I didn't even notice the sun coming up outside. Hours passed before I dared plug the computer back in. I didn't want to, believe me. But part of me needed to know if it was still there. If the site still existed. If the night watchmen were still watching me. When I finally powered the laptop back up, everything was normal. No strange apps, no locked screens, no haunted bookmarks. Nothing. I tried to move on, tried to tell myself it was some sick ARG or twisted prank site. But then, a few days later, I opened my email. That's when I saw it. Subject: a gift from the night watchman. I stared at it for a long time before I clicked. I should have just deleted it, blocked the sender, tossed the whole laptop out the window. But I didn't. I opened it. I think I needed to believe it was all fake. That this would be the punchline, but it wasn't. The email body was just a blank white screen, except for one sentence in giant, bold, black font. Jenna thanks you for sparing her from the night watchman's hand. Underneath that, another line appeared. We appreciate your decision, Lena. We look forward to your next visit. Come play again anytime. My mouth dropped open when I saw the attachment. It was a photo taken in daylight. It showed the same woman, Jenna, walking her dog Gmao through a park trail, still looking down at her phone like nothing had happened. Like she had no idea how close she'd come. I closed my laptop and locked it in a drawer. I will never go near the deep web again. This was back when I was around 13, maybe in 7th grade. Me and two of my friends, Elena and this kid Logan, were stuck in this after-school study group for kids who just could not wrap their heads around math. It was held in the computer lab at our middle school in Dayton, Oregon. Tiny school, even tinier lab. Honestly, the whole thing felt like a punishment more than anything. The teachers there were basically just keeping an eye on us, but not actually teaching. They'd scroll through their phones or grade stuff silently. Unless someone physically asked for help, they didn't care what we were doing. Elena and I were decent friends, and we both got a kick out of teasing Logan, who took everything way too seriously. He'd try to focus on his assignments while we'd mess around just to throw him off. It became our little entertainment during those long, boring sessions. One afternoon, Logan and I were messing around online while pretending to research for our worksheet. We started typing random questions and gibberish into the browser just to see what would pop up. I genuinely can't remember what the search term was. Probably something dumb like fractions, but scary. But the results weren't what we expected. The screen filled with these unsettling black and white photos. They were old, grainy, and most of them looked like they came straight out of some haunted archive. The creepiest ones were basically portrait shots of what looked like people with deformed faces, like some bizarre 1900s mugshot lineup. It gave me that same weird feeling you get when you walk into a room and forget why you're there. Something just felt off. I brushed it off at first, assuming it was one of those internet rabbit holes that make zero sense. But the weird photos kept coming up over and over in different searches. Definitely not normal search results for math homework. A couple days later, Logan stayed behind a little longer to save his homework onto the school's shared drive. The computers were old and glitchy, and somehow he clicked into the wrong folder. Instead of his stuff, he ended up in what looked like an archive of other documents. Leftover files from previous students, or maybe even old staff. It was super disorganized, but he said it felt like stumbling into someone else's inbox. When Logan clicked into the folder to save his stuff, a bunch of random files popped up that definitely weren't his. He looked over at me and went, "Dude, come here. There's some seriously creepy crap in here." I kind of laughed at first because he was always being dramatic. But then he started describing what he saw, and my stomach dropped a little. He said there was this photo of a kid sitting in a chair. Okay, not just sitting, but tied to it. The setting looked like a classroom, but everything about it was off. It was super dark, and the lighting made it look like something from a horror short film. The kid was the only thing in the shot. No desks, no posters, no windows even. Just this old metal chair right in the middle of the room, and the kid was strapped down to it like something out of a crime doc. Logan tried to open it up bigger to show me, but it would only load this tiny preview in the corner of the screen. Still, I saw enough to confirm he wasn't just messing with me. The kid had a red t-shirt on, looked around 8 or 9 years old, and was just staring off to the side, not at the camera, but like it's something just outside the frame. That weird low-quality lighting made it hard to tell what time of day it even was. And the scariest part, the room looked exactly like one of the classrooms down the old hallway in our school. The one nobody really used anymore because of electrical issues. That photo's burned into my brain more than I'd like to admit. What messes with me the most is trying to figure out who the hell took it. It wasn't like it was a screenshot or a stock photo. Someone had been there with a camera in that room taking pictures of this tied-up kid. Like what? The fact that it was just sitting in a school computer folder completely unprotected still creeps me out. I mean, we weren't even trying to find anything like that. We were just goofing off, typing in dumb stuff and clicking through files like curious idiots. Makes me wonder how close we were to stumbling into something even darker. Like if that's what we found by accident, what would have happened if we actually tried digging? I still don't know who that kid was or why that photo even existed. But the idea that someone saved it on a school system, that school system, is honestly way more terrifying than anything we found on purpose. Back when I was around 17 and still in high school, I went through this big phase where I was super into tech stuff. Coding, cracking random software, just messing with things most kids didn't bother with. I wasn't doing anything illegal, at least not on purpose. I just liked seeing how stuff worked. One afternoon, I stumbled onto this sketchy forum while trying to figure out how to spoof my IP address. Don't ask why. I thought I was cooler than I was. Someone posted a thread about getting onto the dark web. I'd vaguely heard about it before, but I didn't really understand what it actually was. Curiosity got the better of me, so I followed the steps they laid out, downloaded the Tor browser, and hopped on. It was underwhelming, not nearly as wild as I expected. I clicked around a few directories, saw a bunch of weird site listings, mostly forums, sketchy service offers, and random stuff for sale. But nothing that held my attention for more than a second. I was basically just snooping without any real purpose. Then about 30 minutes in, my screen went nuts. Full-on chaos. Dozens of pop-ups started exploding all over my desktop, warning me that I'd downloaded some crazy virus. Total panic mode. I slammed my laptop shut, heart pounding. After a few minutes of pacing around like a dumbass, I opened it again, closed Tor, deleted the whole thing, and scrubbed everything I could find related to it off my hard drive. I thought I was in the clear. But later that night, while I was watching Netflix in bed, I noticed this tiny white light near the top of my screen, the one right next to the webcam. It was on, and I mean barely noticeable. The kind of thing you'd never catch unless the room was dark. I had no clue how long it had been lit up, but something about it made my stomach drop. I immediately thought back to my little trip into the dark web and freaked out. First thing I did was grab a sticky note, rip off a piece, and slap it over the camera. Super high-tech fix, I know. Then I went digging through my system settings, trying to turn the webcam off manually. I disabled it from Device Manager, checked for rogue programs, even ran 3 different antivirus programs back to back. But nothing seemed to stop that little light. Eventually, after stressing myself out for days and trying every YouTube fix I could find, I gave up and just did a full wipe of my PC. Factory reset. Nuked the whole thing. I figured whatever sketchy code had slipped in while I was messing around with Tor would get wiped out completely. And for a minute, it looked like it worked. The webcam light finally shut off. I actually let myself relax for once. Thought the worst was behind me. A few days go by and then, boom, out of nowhere, I get a text from this random number I don't recognize. There's no message, just 5 pictures. And when I opened them, my stomach legit dropped. Every single one was a photo of me sitting in front of my laptop, clearly taken through the webcam. I was in my room doing nothing interesting, just browsing or watching something. But here's the part that chilled me. One of the pictures was from after I reset the computer. I could tell because I'd gotten a haircut the next day, and in that photo my hair was freshly buzzed. That meant they still had access. I slapped another piece of tape over the camera, a different color this time, because yes, I weirdly remember that detail, and just sat there frozen. If they were still watching me, they could probably hear me too, right? Like if they had camera access, wouldn't they have mic access as well? Were they listening to my conversations, watching me type passwords, grabbing my info? My brain went full paranoia mode. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if they were already digging through my bank stuff or pretending to be me somewhere? After hours of spiraling, I finally cracked. I went into the kitchen, grabbed a tall glass, filled it with water, and straight up drowned my laptop. Watched the screen flicker and die. Left it sitting there on the floor like a crime scene. I told my parents it slipped off my desk while I was cleaning. Not my most convincing lie. Thankfully, they didn't ask too many questions. They actually helped me replace it, which I still feel a little guilty about. For months, everything was fine. No weird lights, no mystery texts. I almost convinced myself the nightmare was over. But then, about 6 months later, it happened again. Another text, another unknown number, and more pictures. This time from the webcam on my new laptop. The background was clearly my current room, and I recognized one of the shirts I'd just worn a few days ago. That meant at least one of those photos was super recent. The worst part? I never even downloaded Tor or went anywhere near the dark web on this machine. I was extra careful this time, so I have no idea how they got in. And at this point, I'm honestly out of ideas. I was working as a nurse at a private clinic downtown when Kyle started his internship with us. He was 19, tall, lean, and always wore the same gray hoodie under his scrubs, even in warm weather. At first, he was polite and asked a lot of questions about basic procedures, how to check vitals, where we kept certain supplies, and how to update records. But pretty soon, his questions started getting weird. He'd ask how long someone could survive without a hand, or what kind of painkillers would be strong enough to keep someone calm during an amputation. He phrased it like curiosity, but it always felt a bit too eager. He sat with us during lunch, mostly quiet, listening. But when he did talk, it was usually about his uncle. Supposedly, this uncle ran some underground clinic where people came in for illegal surgeries. He doesn't charge if it's something personal, Kyle once said, biting into a sandwich. Like if someone just wants to get rid of a finger they don't like. I thought it was just talk. I mean, he was young, maybe trying to be edgy. Most of the others avoided him. One of the senior nurses, Carol, called him the dead-eyed kid behind his back. But I didn't see much harm in him. Just awkward. Probably lonely. Still, some things didn't add up. He knew surgical lingo better than most interns. Once, I heard him accurately explain how to tie off a brachial artery to one of the doctors. That's not something they teach that early. Another time, he corrected a resident on where to inject lidocaine for a digital nerve block. It wasn't just showing off. He was right. When I asked where he learned that, he said, just reading and helping my uncle sometimes. Always back to the uncle. I started watching him more closely. Not just because of what he said, but because of how he acted around patients. He was too interested in injuries. If someone came in with a broken finger, he'd linger, not offering help, just watching. One day, a guy came in with a deep cut on his thigh from a bike accident. Kyle stood behind me as I cleaned the wound, leaning in, breathing too slowly. I told him to get gauze, and he didn't move for a few seconds. He just stared. Things shifted even more when he started showing me stuff on his phone. One afternoon, after most of the shift had left, I was restocking supplies in the break room. Kyle came in, quiet as usual, and sat across from me. "You want to see something crazy?" he asked. I didn't really want to, but he was already pulling out his phone. He showed me a photo, a close-up of a hand missing 2 fingers. No blood, no mess. Just clean, bandaged stubs like it had been done in an operating room. He swiped. Another hand missing the pinky, then an arm ending at the elbow. "My uncle did these," he said. "They're all voluntary. Some people just don't feel right with all their parts." I told him that sounded insane and definitely illegal. He just shrugged. "It's like body integrity identity disorder. It's real. Look it up." Then he mentioned a site. There's a whole forum. People share results. It's safer than them trying it themselves. When I asked for the site's name, he avoided the question. Said it wasn't public. You needed an invite. You had to know someone. The photos unsettled me. They didn't look like textbook examples or anything staged. They were too specific, too personal. Some had tattoos or bracelets. These weren't generic training images. I tried to tell myself maybe they were just medical students sharing practice results. That maybe Kyle was lying about the context. But the more I thought about it, the less that made sense. There was no educational reason to photograph clean surgical amputations unless they were part of a study. and these weren't labeled. No dates, no watermarks. Kyle started acting even more off. One shift, I noticed him in the supply closet counting syringes and small vials. I asked what he was doing, and he said he was just curious about inventory. I told the head nurse, but she said as long as nothing was missing, there wasn't much she could do. "He's weird," she said, "but not against the rules." Then Kyle mentioned someone who had asked to have both legs removed. "He chickened out at the last minute," he said, not sounding disappointed or relieved, just flat. "My uncle prepped everything already, had the prosthetics ready." I didn't say anything. I just walked away. A few days later, I caught him near the back exit with his phone out. He quickly pocketed it when he saw me. I glanced down and noticed he had a backpack with what looked like bundled cloth inside. When I asked where he was going, he smiled for the first time I'd ever seen. "Just heading out early. Got some errands for my uncle." Then, he disappeared down the hallway. The next day, I checked the inventory log. A few anesthetic vials were missing. Ketamine and lidocaine. Nothing huge, but enough to do something. I told the supervisor, but again, it was brushed off. Maybe someone forgot to log it. Happens. I saw Kyle later that afternoon. He didn't look tired, but there was something off, like he was more focused. His scrubs were clean, but he'd changed into a new pair. His hands were dry and cracked, like they'd been scrubbed a little too long. I didn't confront him. I wasn't sure what I'd even say, but I started locking my drawer and keeping my phone on me at all times. During a slow afternoon shift, I walked into the break room and saw Kyle's phone sitting on the table, the screen still lit. He must have left it unlocked by accident. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the notification on the lock screen caught my eye. New post, bodymods.net. I hesitated, then tapped it. The browser opened straight into a message board. Dozens of posts, photos, and videos loaded instantly. The layout was crude, like an old forum, but everything was organized into categories for limb removal, sensory deprivation, and nerve disconnection. I scrolled down and felt sick. The videos weren't simulated. One showed a man lying on a wooden table, his legs duct taped down, screaming as someone sawed through his forearm. The camera wasn't shaky. It was set up on a tripod. The lighting was clean and clear. I recognized the garage. It looked like the one Kyle had shown me in a photo weeks earlier. I kept scrolling. Another video. Different subject. Similar setting. This time, the angle was wider. I could see Kyle holding down a man's shoulder, his face expressionless as someone else. Maybe his uncle. Cut deep into the man's flesh. Kyle appeared in at least 3 more videos, always assisting, never speaking. In the comment sections, people were bidding. Some offered to travel. Others just wanted the footage, requesting specific camera angles or levels of pain. One person wrote, "Make sure he's awake the whole time, no sedatives. I'll pay double." The thread had hundreds of replies. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of the screen. I got the usernames, timestamps, and links. Just as I took one last screenshot, I heard the door open behind me. Kyle stepped in and saw me instantly. His whole posture changed. The usual slouch was gone. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me, then his phone, then back at me. His face didn't show panic. It showed calculation. He slowly picked up his phone, locked it, and slipped it into his pocket. Then, he smiled. "You shouldn't be in other people's stuff," he said quietly, then walked out. I stayed in the break room until my shift ended, my heart pounding. Every sound in the hallway made me flinch. I thought about deleting the screenshots, then decided to back them up instead. That night, I didn't sleep. The next day, I stayed late, helping clean up after a patient emergency. Everyone else had left. I was finishing paperwork when Kyle came up behind me. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" His tone was calm, too calm. I nodded, trying to play it off, and followed him down the hall. He led me to the supply closet and closed the door behind us. "You saw something yesterday," he said. I tried to act confused, but he grabbed my wrist and squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Tom doesn't like attention. You understand?" I said I didn't know what he was talking about. He leaned in close, still gripping my wrist. "We recorded a guy last month. Took off his own hand with dry ice. Tom just guided him through it. Took 5 hours. Got 40 grand for that stream. People like that stuff. People pay." I didn't respond. I couldn't. He loosened his grip slightly. "We're careful. No names, no leaks. But when someone talks, well, accidents happen. Sometimes they don't walk away with all their parts. Understand?" I yanked my arm free and pushed past him. He followed me down the hallway, still talking. "No one's going to believe you. You've got nothing. You're just scared. That's good. Be scared. Stay scared." I ran to the elevator and hit the button 4 times. Kyle didn't try to stop me. He just stood there staring. I drove home without stopping. When I pulled into my apartment garage, I saw headlights pull in behind me. It was Kyle's car. I stayed inside, locked the doors. He pulled up alongside me and rolled down his window. "You don't want to get involved in this?" he called out. "You really don't." The next morning, I went to the police. I showed them everything. The screenshots, the video snippets, my swollen wrist. At first, the detective seemed doubtful, like maybe I'd misunderstood something. Then I opened the browser and pulled up the site directly. I showed him the forums, the videos, and the bids. I told him everything Kyle had said. The longer he watched, the quieter he got. He told me to wait, left the room, and came back with 2 more officers. Over the next few days, I was questioned multiple times. They wanted details. They asked if I knew where the garage was, who else might be involved, and whether any patients from the clinic had ever disappeared. I gave them everything I had. A week later, they made the arrests. Kyle, his uncle Tom, and 10 others from different states. Some were moderators. Others were performing or requesting surgeries. A couple had medical licenses. Most didn't. The operation had been going for almost 6 years. They'd performed dozens of amputations, some voluntary, others not. They streamed them all. They took requests. They sold edited clips. One man in Texas paid $12,000 for a video where someone had their ears sewn shut while conscious. Another ordered a slow removal of toes, 1 per week. Kyle agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. He gave up names, locations, and payment trails. He got probation. His uncle wasn't so lucky. He was hit with charges for aggravated assault, illegal practice of medicine, conspiracy, and more. He got 18 years. Others got between 5 and 10. Some pleaded out. I quit the clinic a month later, moved to a different city, and changed my number. I still work in healthcare, but I don't tell people where. Sometimes at night, I check the door twice. I look out the window to make sure no one's waiting in the parking lot. Every now and then, I check the site just to see if it's gone. The domain still exists, but it's been blank for months. The detective told me this wasn't the only network, just the one we caught. He said, "Some people don't want to be helped. They want to be hurt. And someone, somewhere, is always willing to give them what they ask for." I met Jessica during shift change at the textile plant. She worked nights, I worked mornings. We crossed paths for maybe 20 minutes every day, right around 5:40 a.m. when the buzzer went off and the night crew trickled out. She'd usually be pulling her hair back into a bun, grabbing her hoodie, looking half asleep, but always polite. "Morning," she'd say, or just a quick nod if she was tired. Over a couple of weeks, we started talking. Just small stuff at first. Weather, traffic, her kids. She had 2 teenagers, and she was always hustling for overtime when she could get it. I remember she said the warehouse paid more at night. Something about hazard pay or weird hours. She never complained about it, though. Said she liked the quiet. Said she could think better when no one was yelling. The complex itself was huge. Several buildings, one of them long abandoned, used now and then to store extra pallets. Most of us didn't go near it. Half the lights in that section flickered, and the floor had cracked in places. Jessica wasn't the type to stir trouble. Always showed up early, clocked out on time, kept to herself unless someone talked to her first. If you needed help loading a bin, she'd step in. She didn't gossip in the break room. Didn't mess with anyone's stuff. It's why I was thrown when she started acting off one morning. She was standing by the vending machines, staring out toward the edge of the lot. I asked if she was okay. She said, "I think something's going on over by Building 5. That was one of the abandoned ones. I told her it was probably just rats or a broken sensor tripping the floodlights. She didn't laugh. She said she'd seen trucks pull up around 3 a.m., headlights off, real quiet. "They don't use that dock," she said. "No one's supposed to, but they're unloading something." I brushed it off. I figured maybe the company was renting space, but her face stuck with me all morning. Over the next few days, she brought it up again. Said the trucks came every other night. Same 2, dark-colored, no logos. One of them had out-of-state plates. She started writing down the plate numbers. She showed me a torn scrap of paper, 4 or 5 numbers jotted in messy pen. "If something happens," she said, then kind of laughed, but not like it was a joke. Then she said the security guards avoided the area. They'd do their usual rounds, then skip Building 5 completely. She asked one of them why. The guy just shrugged and walked away. That's when she started staying late. After her shift, she'd sit in her car facing the warehouse. "They don't even try to hide it," she told me. "They know nobody's watching." I still wasn't sure if I believed her. Maybe she was tired. She worked 6 nights a week, had 2 kids, barely slept. But the way she talked, it was specific. She said the back doors were always shut during the day. But during those 3 a.m. visits, someone opened them from the inside. That part made me pause. Inside? Who was in there? She took pictures. At first, blurry ones from far away. A red truck, a couple of guys moving boxes fast. One of them glancing around. "They don't stay more than 20 minutes, she told me. Just in, out, gone." She tried showing the photos to our supervisor. I was there. His face changed. He told her not to worry about it. "You're not paid to investigate," he said, tossing the photo onto his desk. I asked her what she was expecting. She said, "I just want to know what they're moving." The next morning, she looked more tired than usual. She told me she waited until 4 a.m. the night before. The trucks didn't show. She thought maybe they knew she was watching. Or maybe they only came when no one was scheduled on that side. She asked me if I'd ever seen anyone else over there. I hadn't. I didn't even park on that side. Most of us didn't. She got quieter after that, still showed up, still nodded when she passed me. But she stopped talking during changeover. A week passed, then another. I figured she'd dropped it. Then one day, she handed me a folded sheet of paper. "Keep this," she said, "just in case." Inside were 10 photos, better quality. She must have gotten closer. One showed a man lifting a long black case from the back of a truck. Another showed a second man, face visible, standing by the dock door, holding what looked like a walkie-talkie. She'd circled their faces. On the back, she'd written the date and time. April 12th, 3:17 a.m. I didn't know what to do with it. I kept it in my glove compartment. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, Jessica didn't show. Not during changeover, not later either. I asked around. No one had seen her. The supervisor said she'd called out. That didn't sound like her. I went out during lunch and walked the length of the parking lot, stopping just outside the chain link fence near Building 5. There were tire marks in the gravel. A few plastic straps lay near the loading dock. One of them looked freshly cut. I backed away fast and didn't say anything to anyone. When I got back to my car, I looked across the lot. On the far side, just barely visible through the grime on the warehouse window, I saw a flicker of movement. Someone was inside. Jessica came in Tuesday morning looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were shaking while she tied back her hair. I asked if she was okay, and she pulled me aside near the break room, away from the cameras. She said, "I saw inside last night. Really saw." Her voice was low, barely above a whisper. I asked what she meant. She said she slipped in through a side door left cracked open. Said the trucks were late, so she had time to look around. Inside, she said, it looked like a hospital freezer. Metal containers labeled with codes and red stickers, some open. She said she saw plastic bags filled with what looked like organs. Livers, kidneys, maybe hearts. They were sorting them, she told me. 2 guys in scrubs, like surgeons, gloves, masks, the whole thing. One of them was checking tags on the bags. I asked why she didn't call the cops. She just stared at me. "They'll kill me," she said. "They're not street thugs. They have real money." She showed me her phone. She had video, maybe 2 minutes long. Shaky footage from behind a stack of pallets. Blurry, but you could see the men moving between the containers. You could hear one of them say something about a schedule in Bangkok next week. I felt sick watching it. She said she overheard them talking about donors and clients overseas. Then she looked down and said, "They know I saw." The night before, her landline rang 5 times. She picked up each time. Silence. No background noise, no clicks. Just someone on the other end, breathing. She'd unplugged it by the 5th call. Her cell was doing the same thing. Unknown numbers calling at all hours. No voicemails, no texts. Just endless rings. I begged her to leave. "Take your kids and go," I said. "You don't need proof. Just go." She looked at me like she wanted to. But then she said, "I'm 3 weeks from getting them new school uniforms. Rent's due. I don't have savings." She was crying, but she wasn't panicking. She was just tired. If I disappear now, who's going to believe me later? That was the last time we had a long talk. 2 days later, my phone buzzed at 6 a.m. I was getting ready for work. My coworker had sent a Facebook link. "Jessica's going nuts," the message said. I clicked it. She had gone live overnight. The video was 15 minutes long. She was in her living room, holding her phone at arm's length. Her voice was tense, but she didn't sound confused or hysterical. She named the warehouse, said the company name, showed the footage she'd taken. She flipped through photos, reading license plates out loud. "They're moving human organs," she said. "I don't care if you believe me. Just watch. Look at this." The video caught fire online. Within hours, people were sharing it. Local pages reposted it. People commented with disbelief, anger, curiosity. But then it turned. Accounts with no profile pictures started showing up. "You're dead," one comment said. Another posted her full name, address, and phone number. Someone posted the names of her kids and what school they went to. I texted her, told her to take it down, but she never responded. She tried deleting the post, but it had already been saved and reposted to Telegram, Twitter, and forums. People were messaging her constantly. Her voicemail was full. I tried calling that night, straight to voicemail. I figured she'd turned off her phone. I didn't sleep. The next day, she didn't show. The supervisor said nothing. Just checked her name off the schedule and moved on. I went by her apartment after work. Her car was in the lot, lights off. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Nothing. A neighbor peeked out their door and shook their head. "Haven't seen her," they said. That night, people on Reddit started saying she'd been taken. One guy posted that black SUVs had pulled into her complex around 9 p.m. He claimed he heard shouting, maybe a kid crying, but he wasn't sure. Police didn't come. No report was filed. The next morning, I drove by again. Her car was gone, windows shut. No answer at the door. 3 days passed. I went to work, kept my head down. Then the news broke. Police found body parts in a sealed container at a disposal yard across town. A maintenance crew had flagged it because of the smell. Inside was a cooler, blood-soaked towels, and several plastic bags. The report said DNA confirmed the remains belonged to Jessica. There was no sign of her kids. No one could say when they were last seen. Her phone had been turned off for days. Police said foul play was suspected. Then they stopped talking. I tried asking questions at work. No one answered. The warehouse was closed off for one day, then reopened. People said the area had been cleaned out. No crates, no trucks, nothing left behind. Cameras wiped. The guards rotated out the next week. When I asked where the old ones went, I was told not to ask. 2 weeks later, men in black suits came to the factory. Federal agents, we were told. They interviewed a few people, then left. No one was arrested. No charges filed. Jessica's name disappeared from the attendance log. Her locker was emptied. Her name was gone from the system, like she never worked there. I transferred 2 months later. Different facility, different town. I kept my mouth shut, deleted old texts, burned the paper she gave me. I didn't keep copies of the video. I don't talk about it, not with anyone in person. But I think about it every time I drive past industrial parks or see unmarked trucks at night. I don't trust silence anymore. The district still runs like nothing happened. New workers, fresh coats of paint on the buildings. But the old crew knows. We don't say her name. We don't mention the warehouse. We just clock in, do our job, and clock out. People think the scariest thing is ghosts or killers in the dark. It's not. It's knowing that some truths are too dangerous to speak. That money can erase anything, even a mother and her kids. I was 19 and working a summer internship at a tech company when I met Marcus. He was 24, one of the back-end programmers. On my second day, he showed me how to set up the internal dev environment, stayed behind to help me fix some error logs, then brought me a coffee the next morning. I figured he was just being nice. A few days later, he was at my desk again, asking what classes I was taking back at school. He remembered I'd mentioned psychology. That stuck out to me. Most people at the company didn't seem to listen much when interns talked. The office was a quiet, open-plan floor with desks in rows and glass walls separating conference rooms. I sat near the middle. Marcus would walk over a few times a day with some excuse, asking if I had an extra charger, if I'd tried the food truck outside, even borrowing my stapler once. It was always something small. He started bringing me coffee 2 or 3 times a week, always just the way I liked it. I said thank you every time. I didn't think much of it until the company July party. It was held on the rooftop. Casual drinks, catered snacks. Marcus asked if I was going, then offered to go up together. I didn't think it would be a date or anything, but the second we got there, he kept hovering. Every time I spoke to someone, co-workers, other interns, Marcus would cut in or stand close, like he was watching the conversation. When I went to get another drink, he followed me and asked, "Do you like hanging out with him?" Referring to one of the other interns. I laughed it off and said we were just talking. His face didn't move. That's when I started feeling off about him. That Monday, I told him politely that I didn't think we should hang out outside of work and that I wanted to keep things professional. He didn't argue, just nodded and said, "Sure, of course," then walked away. After that, things shifted. He stopped bringing coffee and didn't say hi. But I caught him staring at me sometimes from across the room. Once I turned around in the kitchen and he was right behind me, too close, just watching. I started taking longer routes through the building to avoid him. By mid-August, the internship ended. I packed up, gave my badge to HR, and took the train back to school in Boston. I blocked Marcus on social media the day I left just to be safe. A week later, I posted a picture with my new boyfriend. I forgot about Marcus. The call came on a Tuesday morning, the second week of September. I was still half asleep when I answered. The man on the other end said, "This is Special Agent Miller with the FBI. I need to speak to you about a matter involving your personal safety." I sat up fast. I thought it was a scam, but he gave a callback number and an agent ID. He said they'd identified a threat against my life. He told me that their cyber unit had been monitoring activity on several dark web forums, ones that are used for illegal contracts, including murder for hire. He said a user with the handle Shadow47 had posted a photo of me along with my full name, address, and even details about my daily schedule. When I left my apartment, where I worked part-time, which routes I took to class. It even included the color of my backpack. I couldn't speak for a second. Then I asked if this was some kind of mistake. He said no. His voice stayed flat, calm. He told me the contract was originally listed as a kidnapping, with a buyer offering to pay $4,000. But 3 days ago, the listing was updated to an assassination contract with the price raised to $7,500. He said the payment had already been put into a crypto escrow account, which meant someone was taking it seriously. He asked if I knew anyone who might want to hurt me. I froze. Marcus came to mind instantly. I hadn't spoken to him since the internship, but I remembered the way he acted at the party, the way he stared at me in the kitchen. Then I remembered the photo I'd posted with my boyfriend. It went up 4 days ago. The timing matched too well. I told Agent Miller about Marcus, explained everything. The coffee, the party, how I'd turned him down. Miller asked if Marcus had any military background, access to weapons, or criminal history. I didn't know. He said they would look into him. Then, he asked me not to go anywhere alone, to keep my phone on at all times, and to avoid posting anything online for now. By that evening, campus police were informed. I was moved into a different dorm under a temporary name. My boyfriend wasn't allowed to stay over. They put a camera at the entrance to the building and gave me a panic button app linked directly to local law enforcement. I kept the blinds down, stopped wearing my usual jacket, changed my routes, and stopped checking social media altogether. The agent said they had flagged the crypto wallet involved in the transaction, but it had already been split into smaller amounts and was hard to trace. The contractor hadn't communicated again on the forum, which meant either they were already in motion or waiting for confirmation. I asked if I could go home to my parents. Miller said it wasn't safe to move yet. On Thursday morning, I got another call. This time, Miller said they had linked the account Shadow47 to an IP address used briefly by someone on the tech company's guest Wi-Fi network during a 30-minute window in August. They were trying to match MAC addresses, but it was slow going. Then he said they had reason to believe the account had accessed my LinkedIn profile recently. I opened my laptop and checked the Who's Viewed Your Profile section. Near the top was Anonymous LinkedIn Member. It had shown up 2 days after I posted the photo of me and my boyfriend. Miller showed me screenshots from the dark web post. My face was clearly visible in one of them. I was walking out of my apartment building holding my backpack, headphones in. Another showed me at the corner store a block away, looking down at my phone. The third was from behind, taken from a distance, but it was me crossing campus near the engineering building. The photos had timestamps. Some were from 2 weeks ago, others were just 5 days old. Someone had been following me, learning my schedule, taking pictures without me ever noticing. The text of the post detailed everything: my name, age, major, even the floor my dorm room was on. It described my usual wake-up time, my morning coffee stop when I went to class, and what times I was likely to be alone. The post had instructions to ensure the scene resembled a failed mugging or pedestrian accident. I stared at that line for a long time. Miller told me that while most dark web murder-for-hire sites were scams, this one had been linked to 2 other real cases, both unsolved, both with similar language in the listings. He said they'd had trouble with jurisdiction and tracing payments. But this wasn't just internet noise. He asked if I recognized anything in the writing. The style reminded me of how Marcus wrote his work emails. Weirdly formal, with phrases like, "as per previous discussion," and "pursuant to schedule." The username Shadow47 didn't match anything directly, but Miller said they were already building a digital profile for Marcus and needed something more concrete. I kept thinking about the times Marcus stood silently near me in the kitchen, or how he always seemed to know when I was going to lunch. Every little moment started feeling heavier. Miller told me to stay low, limit all movement, and not post anything online. They were working on a warrant. The next day, Miller had an idea. He asked if I'd be willing to call Marcus while they recorded. The goal was to get him talking, maybe say something incriminating. I agreed, even though my hands were shaking when I dialed. It rang twice before Marcus picked up. "Hey," I said, "it's me. Hope this isn't weird. I've been having some issues with a script from the internship project. Thought you might know what's up." His voice shifted immediately. Friendly? Cheerful? "Oh, hey. Wow. It's good to hear from you. Yeah, sure. What's going on with it?" I kept it casual. Asked about the config files and some dependency stuff. He gave a detailed answer, asked what kind of laptop I was using now. Then, unprompted, he said, "You still doing the 9 a.m. coffee thing before class?" My stomach dropped. I'd never told him that. I tried to keep my voice even. "Yeah, sometimes. I've been feeling kind of unsafe lately. Weird stuff happening around my building." There was a pause. "You should really be more careful about who you trust," he said. "People put a lot online without realizing how visible they are." I said, "Yeah, the FBI actually called me. Something about someone trying to hurt me." Another pause. "They called you?" His tone shifted, tight. "That's insane. Who'd even do that? I mean, you've always been a little dramatic. But FBI? Really?" I asked, "You sure you don't know anything about that?" He raised his voice. "Of course not. That's ridiculous. Are you accusing me of something?" Before I could answer, he hung up. Miller said it was enough to get a judge to sign off on searching Marcus's personal laptop and drives. The next 72 hours were a blur. I stayed in my dorm, barely sleeping. They found a backup drive in his apartment. It had folders of screenshots from my Instagram, posts I'd since deleted, and several documents that tracked my schedule down to the hour. Some were labeled with dates, some had maps. But the biggest find was a record of cryptocurrency wallet keys and a payment log that matched the hit contract. The amount, $7,500, was traced through a series of transfers, and it landed in an escrow system used by the site Miller showed me. They also found several fake social media accounts created from his IP range, all following my pages, sometimes messaging my friends. He'd even joined a subreddit for students at my university, using it to comment on events and locations. But even with all that, prosecution got complicated. The dark web platform was overseas. The contract went through anonymous wallets, and legally proving intent without a direct confession was difficult. The defense argued the material could have been faked, that there was no direct communication between Marcus and anyone on the site. Without a clear chain of contact between him and a killer, the charges didn't hold. Marcus took a plea on a lesser charge related to digital stalking and harassment. He moved to another state during pre-trial. The FBI said they'd keep tabs on him, but there was no legal way to block him from starting over somewhere else. His record was sealed after the plea. They couldn't link him definitively to the dark web account. I stopped using my real name online, deleted old posts, changed my number, even left school a semester early. I look over my shoulder when I go out, check for cameras near my apartment, and avoid routines. Miller said there are dozens, maybe hundreds, of sites like the one that listed me. He said, "Some are jokes, scams for desperate people, but others, like this one, are real enough." He said, "The FBI has a backlog of cases involving anonymous threats and contracts where nothing can be proven. A lot of them never get resolved." I still think about how easy it was. How someone with a grudge could take a few photos, write a few lines, and push a button. That's all it took. The scariest part wasn't that Marcus tried to have me killed. It's that he didn't need to be special or smart to do it. He just needed internet access. Professor Cooper was my favorite computer science instructor during my junior year at the university. He made things like sorting algorithms, and decision trees actually interesting, even for people like me who weren't naturally good at that stuff. He had a way of breaking down concepts that made you feel smart for getting them. I remember sitting in the third row every Monday and Wednesday, trying to keep up with his whiteboard examples and the rapid-fire questions he threw at the class. He remembered everyone's name by the second week and asked about our internships, side projects, even the clubs we joined. He was tall, lean, and always wore button-down shirts with the sleeves rolled up. His glasses had a small crack on the left frame, which he never seemed to fix. He'd stay after class answering our dumbest questions without ever making us feel dumb. I once asked him something that was already explained in the syllabus, and he just nodded and re-explained it like it was no big deal. Everyone liked him. Some of the guys called him Coop, but he never corrected them. I had trouble with my capstone proposal that semester. Cooper spent 2 hours helping me reshape it into something feasible and impressive. When I told him I was working nights at a cafe to cover rent, he offered to write me a reference letter for a paid research assistant role. He even told me about a scholarship program I hadn't heard of. He knew stuff like that, how to navigate university bureaucracy, where to go for grants, internships, and publishing opportunities. I trusted him completely. So did most of the class. He had published papers on data ethics and surveillance capitalism, and he'd cite real cases in class to show how easy it was for companies to abuse data. It sounded scary, but it came from someone who seemed like he actually cared. He'd say things like, "Be paranoid, it's the healthy choice." And we'd laugh because it was Cooper. And he was usually right. We all followed each other on social media. Some of us followed Cooper too. He had a private Instagram and a locked-down Twitter account. Once in a while, he'd like a picture of someone's cat or repost an article one of us had shared. I figured he just wanted to stay connected like any mentor would. I didn't notice anything strange until mid-semester. It was small things at first. He'd mention specific tweets or Instagram captions during class. He'd say it was just an example of how public people were with their lives. But sometimes it felt targeted. Once he brought up a classmate's drunk photo and joked about how fast employers can find stuff like that. We laughed, but the class went quiet right after. Another time, a girl named Sarah mentioned a fight she was having with her roommate. Cooper told her to check her location settings because apps could leak private data. He added, "Also, maybe don't vent on your close friend's story. Not everyone keeps things confidential." Sarah didn't say anything. She just nodded. But after class, I saw her delete her entire account. He said these things like teaching moments, but the details were too exact. He wasn't just browsing our profiles. He was watching. Then came the survey. Cooper handed out a digital habits questionnaire. 20 questions about our browsing history, password choices, family devices, and who had access to our accounts. He told us it was part of his cybersecurity research and that our answers were anonymous. I didn't think much of it. I filled it out like everyone else. A week later, he asked me how my sister liked the new iPad. I never told him I had a sister. The only place I'd mentioned it was in the survey under a question asking who in my household used shared devices. I froze. He noticed and smiled. "Don't worry. It's just research." He often used our real social media pages in lectures. He'd screenshot examples of public LinkedIn bios, Instagram settings, even Venmo histories, always with the names cropped out. But we recognized ourselves. "This is what recruiters see," he'd say. "And this is how scammers find your mother's maiden name." Some students would groan or laugh. No one complained. He spent a lot of time with first years too. I started noticing him in the cafeteria, sitting with freshmen, always talking about digital safety. Turn off geotags, he'd say. Don't sync your photos to the cloud. He'd offer to look over their settings, sometimes even take their phones and start changing things. They let him. He had authority, charm. He'd message students outside of class, too. Once he DM'd me after I posted a photo for my late shift at the cafe. You really should blur your name tag. Just looking out. That part sounded okay. But when I checked, the name tag wasn't visible unless you zoomed in really far. He had done that. He was zooming in. One student, Jonah, told me Cooper messaged him late at night about his Twitch streams. He said he was watching to make sure Jonah wasn't revealing too much personal information. Kind of weird, Jonah said. But he was just looking out, I guess. I didn't reply. Cooper also asked us to send him examples of phishing emails and suspicious DMs. He said he was building a teaching tool to help identify scams. I forwarded a few. Others did too. Now I wonder if we just gave him access to our inboxes. When another student, Elena, mentioned her brother's run-in with the law, Cooper suggested she make her Facebook private. A few days later, he casually referenced her brother's arrest record during office hours. She brushed it off. But I saw her leave his office looking shaken. The oddest thing was how often he talked about being careful with metadata. He'd say things like, "Even your silence is data," or "Every click leaves a trail." At the time, it sounded deep. Now it sounds like a warning. The semester went on. Cooper kept collecting. Students kept sharing. He made himself essential. We never questioned it. We were studying security. Everything he did seemed like a lesson. But behind every lesson, he was building a file, a detailed profile on all of us. Things started to get weird around campus not long after midterms. It was subtle at first. A few freshmen who had taken Cooper's intro courses stopped showing up to class. One of them, Kelly, had been really active in the computer science forums and showed up to every tutoring session. She was just gone. Someone said she transferred, but no one knew where. Another guy, Kevin, left after spring break, and all his social accounts went dark the same day. Everyone just assumed personal stuff came up. That's what the professor said. Family emergency was the phrase used most often. Then, one night after my shift, I overheard two students whispering in the library about someone getting threatening DMs. Stuff like "I know what you did," and "you send more or I'll release everything." It sounded like a scam at first, but they mentioned that the messages included private details. Stuff nobody else should have known, things people had only talked about in DMs or posts that had already been deleted. At first, I thought maybe they got hacked. It escalated quickly. Another girl, Emma, who had just started the CS program, left school after saying someone was stalking her online. She'd gotten texts with photos of her walking to her dorm, photos she didn't take. She went home the next day. Campus police said it was being investigated, but no one ever told us what happened, and I couldn't stop thinking about what Cooper used to say in class. Everything leaves a trail. Metadata never lies. It all sounded different now. I started to put things together. The students who left or got messages had mostly taken Cooper's intro class. Most were younger, new to campus, the type who'd turn to a friendly professor for guidance. I brought it up during one of Cooper's office hours. I mentioned the rumors, students dropping out, the weird messages. He didn't seem surprised. He said, "This is exactly why I push cybersecurity so hard. There are predators out there. You can't be too careful." He said it calmly, but something about his tone stuck with me. Not defensive, not shocked, just aware, like he'd already thought it through. I asked him if the university was looking into it. He said, "They should be, but these things take time." The next week, I stopped by the CS lounge and saw him sitting with a first-year student named Riley. Cooper was holding Riley's phone, pointing at the settings. Riley looked confused, but nodded along. I walked away before they noticed me. That night, I deleted all my old posts, locked my accounts, and changed every password. Then it happened. On a Tuesday morning, I walked into class 5 minutes late. Cooper was mid-sentence explaining a machine learning concept. I sat down and opened my laptop. 2 men in suits entered through the back. Everyone turned. They walked straight to the front, flashed badges, and asked Cooper to step aside. He froze. One of the agents said, "Professor Richard Cooper, you're under arrest on charges related to sexual exploitation and extortion." The room went completely silent. Someone dropped a water bottle. They cuffed him right there. Cooper didn't argue. He just kept saying, "There's been a mistake. This isn't what it looks like." The agents ignored him and collected his laptop, phone, and a stack of papers from his desk. We all sat frozen as they walked him out. One student started crying quietly. No one said anything. Later that afternoon, the university sent an email. It confirmed Cooper's arrest and said he'd been running a scheme for years. Using fake social media profiles, he'd contacted minors, built relationships, and manipulated them into sending explicit content. Then he'd blackmail them for more. He used knowledge from our classes, data scraping, account forensics, and password recovery, to find everything he could on his targets. They said 28 victims had been identified, some as young as 13. A few had attempted suicide. Most hadn't spoken up until investigators found their records on Cooper's encrypted drives. It felt like the ground dropped out from under us. Everyone I talked to felt the same way. Cooper had been the guy you trusted, the smart one, the one who cared. The trial was long. The prosecutors laid out everything in detail. Cooper had created over 100 fake identities, used voice changers, encrypted messaging apps, and burner accounts. He covered his digital trail using VPNs and proxy chains. He used cryptocurrency to buy blackmail tools and message scrapers from dark web forums. The FBI found code on his computer that could scrape Facebook, Instagram, and Discord conversations without triggering alerts. They brought in digital forensics experts to explain how he tracked victims' devices through metadata hidden in images. He kept files on each person, screenshots, chat logs, photos, even voice recordings. Each victim had a folder labeled with a nickname. Some folders had detailed psychological notes. Cooper used everything he could to maintain control. Threats to ruin reputations, leak images, and even send messages to family members. He was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison on 89 counts of exploitation and extortion, with no possibility of parole. The university tried to act fast. They set up a new department for online safety, required all staff communication with students to go through university channels, and banned personal contact outside official platforms. Faculty had to attend training on boundaries and digital ethics. But none of it changed what happened. Some of the victims testified anonymously. Some didn't speak at all. A few attended the hearings in person. I remember one of them leaving the courtroom, walking fast, hood up, never looking back. I finished my degree the next year, got a job in network security, but I stopped volunteering as a peer mentor. I didn't go to office hours anymore, When new professors emailed, I replied with one-word answers. Everyone said Cooper was one of the best. That's what made it easy for him. When I was 31, I worked the night shift as a nurse in the maternity ward at County General. My pay barely covered rent and groceries. And with 2 kids, it felt like I was drowning. My schedule rotated too much to get a second job, and child support was unpredictable. That hospital was always short-staffed. Supplies arrived late, and some of our monitors looked like they hadn't been calibrated in years. I got used to it, but I hated how many corners we had to cut. Everyone just did what they had to. Dr. Richardson joined us maybe 6 months into that year. He was older than most of the new hires, early 40s maybe. Tall, calm, never raised his voice. He had this polished way of speaking, like he was used to private clinics. No one really understood why he ended up in our run-down hospital. He didn't bring it up, and we didn't ask. He stayed late a lot, even when his shift ended, and didn't mind covering for someone if they needed to leave. A few of the younger nurses thought he was too polished, like he was hiding something. But he always treated me respectfully, even when I was snapping at people from exhaustion. I didn't have time for gossip. I was focused on surviving the month. It was after a long, rough night. A mother came in from a nearby town. No prenatal visits, heavy bleeding. We barely saved her and the baby. I was cleaning up, running on no sleep, when Richardson found me in the supply closet counting IV bags. He asked if I was interested in picking up some administrative work off the books. He said he noticed how often I stayed late, how hard I worked, and that he could use someone reliable. I just looked at him. He pulled out a wad of cash from his coat pocket, clean bills folded neatly, and said he'd pay me for a couple hours of help here and there. I didn't agree right away. I waited until the next week, when my fridge broke and I had to choose between fixing it or paying for both of my kids' field trip fees. That's when I told him I was in. He didn't give many instructions. He said we'd meet in one of the unused offices near the records room after most of the staff went home. The first time it felt harmless. He had a few birth certificates printed out and a couple of hospital intake forms. He told me which lines to adjust. Small things. A date changed from the 8th to the 10th. A time moved 2 hours forward. A signature from a nurse I didn't know swapped out for another. He said insurance companies rejected claims for dumb reasons, and that this just helped families avoid that. I didn't ask too many questions. $200 for something that took 30 minutes. It was more than my whole night shift paid. Richardson always handed me the cash after I was done. No small talk, no records. He never wanted anything personal, never crossed any lines. Just business. We did this maybe twice a week, always late, always in that back office near records. It was cold in there, and the ceiling lights buzzed quietly. The files came in manila folders. No patient names on the outside, just numbers. I asked once if I'd get in trouble if anyone found out. He said the corrections were internal, wouldn't be traced to me, and that I should keep everything confidential. Administration has no sense for efficiency, he said. It went like that for about 3 weeks. Sometimes the changes made less sense. A C-section marked as a vaginal delivery. A birth date pushed back by 2 months. Once, I had to replace a birth certificate with an entirely new one. Richardson said it was an error from a transfer case. Some baby born at a clinic before being brought to us. Again, I didn't press. I just counted the cash afterward and walked home, watching over my shoulder out of habit. One night, he had more than usual. 4 full folders. He looked more tired than normal, dark circles under his eyes. He told me some of the forms were from a backlog of cases that needed cleaning up before the quarterly audit. I nodded and started reviewing them. The handwriting on some of the forms wasn't his. The ink looked older. There were smudges on one of the envelopes, like it had gotten wet. I asked if these were all from County General. He didn't answer right away. "They're all linked to our records now," he finally said without looking at me. I remember one file had a chart with no mother's name, just unknown, and a set of lab results. I was supposed to fill in a name from another form, copy it over, then change the time of birth to match a different entry. He stood behind me while I worked, sipping from a paper cup of coffee. He never used the vending machine. He always brought his own. Later, I started noticing things around the hospital. Files that used to be on the third shelf of the records room were missing. One nurse mentioned a weird discrepancy on a discharge summary. A baby that was supposedly delivered by Dr. Patel showed up in the computer as one of Richardson's cases. She brushed it off, blaming a computer error. I kept doing the file work even when it felt off. My son's braces were coming up, and my daughter's school trip deposit was overdue. I told myself I was just fixing typos. The hospital was a mess anyway. What difference did it make if a few forms were shuffled around? One Thursday night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It simply said, "Room 412, come alone." I almost ignored it. But then Richardson called my cell a minute later. "It's me," he said. "I left something urgent in 412. Meet me there instead of the office." Room 412 was down the west wing near pediatrics, a place we rarely used during the night shift. Most of that hallway was dark. As I walked down, the lights overhead flickered. The door to 412 was slightly open. I pushed it slowly, trying not to make any sound. Inside, the lights were off, but moonlight came through the window. Something was covered on the bed with a hospital sheet. I turned on the bedside lamp. The sheet didn't move. I stood still for a few seconds, listening. Nothing but the faint hum of the building. I stepped closer and pulled the sheet back just enough to see. It wasn't a patient. It was a file folder and a sealed cooler, like the kind we use for organ transport. The folder had my name on it. Inside were copies of every document I'd altered over the last 2 months. Birth certificates, intake forms, discharge summaries, all with my handwriting. My stomach dropped. Behind me, the door clicked shut. Richardson stood there, arms crossed. "I had to make sure you were all in," he said. "No backing out." That's when he told me everything. The babies we'd marked as stillborn were alive. He had contacts, rich families, people from out of state who paid for newborns, no questions asked. Most couldn't adopt legally for various reasons: past legal issues, age, immigration status. Some just didn't want the red tape. He pulled out his phone and opened an app. It looked like an encrypted marketplace. Listings with ID numbers, medical stats, birth dates, fake names, photos of newborns, some with notes like, "Blue eyes expected," or "No family history of illness." I stared at it and couldn't move. "They're getting better lives than the system gives them," Richardson said. "You know how foster care ends up for kids. We're helping. And now that you're in, you'll earn more. $500 per file. 2, maybe 3 babies a month." I wanted to say no, but he had everything. Documents, camera footage, even text messages. He knew about my debts, the rent payments I'd skipped, and the forged time cards. He made it clear that if I backed out, I'd lose my job and probably end up in jail. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling and counted the hours until morning. After that, things moved fast. Richardson gave me specific cases to monitor. Young mothers alone, women who missed prenatal visits, addicts brought in by ambulance. We'd identify vulnerable patients, and when labor started, he'd step in and take over. The baby would be born healthy. But on paper, it died. I'd handle the death certificate. Sometimes I'd stay with the mother, help sedate her, keep her distracted. Other times I'd just quietly file the paperwork and make sure no one else touched the chart. The infants were handed off within hours. A private ambulance would arrive, paperwork already in place, and take the baby to a location I was never told. Richardson said the transport team didn't speak English. We never talked about it in the hospital, only at night, behind closed doors. In the first 6 months, we processed 9 babies. I kept the money in a locked box at home, afraid to deposit it. I told myself I was going to stop. But every time something came up, my car broke down, my daughter needed braces, my landlord raised the rent, Richardson made it easy to say yes again. One night I saw a mother crying in the hallway, sitting on the floor in her hospital gown. I recognized her. She was supposed to have delivered a stillborn that morning. I asked if she needed help. She looked up with swollen eyes. "I saw her," she said. "She was breathing. I swear to God, she was breathing." I froze, nodded like I hadn't heard her, and walked away. That night, Richardson didn't mention it. We just did another file. By the end of the year, we'd handled 23 cases. I had over $11,000 in cash. I bought a second-hand car, paid off my credit card, and replaced the broken water heater. It all fell apart in April. A young woman, maybe 19, came in alone, high on something. She delivered a baby girl. I did my part, cleaned the record, filed the stillbirth form, but the girl kept asking to see her baby. Richardson told her it wasn't viable. He said it had multiple complications. She didn't buy it. The next day, she demanded to see the body. Richardson brought in a baby from the nursery. Wrong infant, wrong details. The girl stared at it and said, "Her eyes are brown. Mine are blue. Her father's are too. We both have blue eyes." She started screaming. Security had to escort her out. 2 days later, detectives showed up. They asked about stillbirths, about record inconsistencies. The girl had gone to the police. They started pulling files and comparing them. A week later, federal agents raided the hospital. They arrested Richardson in the parking garage. I was taken from my shift in handcuffs. 6 others were arrested too. 2 from records, 1 from pediatrics, and the rest from nearby clinics we didn't even know were involved. I sat in a white room with 2 FBI agents for 6 hours. They showed me photos of the babies, birth records, phone logs. I told them everything, every folder, every delivery, every lie. I signed a deal, a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation. Richardson got 25 years. He didn't speak during the trial. I got 8 years in minimum security. I testified against everyone I knew. Some broke down and confessed. Others swore they were set up. The investigation uncovered adoption rings across 12 states. Judges, doctors, lawyers. Most of the babies were found. 3 never were. I lost my nursing license. My kids live with their aunt. They visit sometimes. But it's different. I'm different. I live under another name now. They moved me through 3 cities before settling me here. I work nights at a warehouse. Keep to myself. Sometimes I still hear the mothers crying in the hallway. I remember their names, the way they looked when I told them, "I'm sorry." I thought the money would fix things. I thought I was helping. All I did was destroy lives, one file at a time. So when I was 23, I was in my third year of dental school at a state university. Most days started at 7 a.m., and by noon, my brain felt like mush. Our professors kept drilling into us how essential it was to get real human teeth for our final practicum. They said plastic models wouldn't cut it, that we needed to understand the different densities, the root shapes, and how tools behaved on actual enamel. The problem was, the school didn't give us enough. Maybe half of what was needed, and even those were shared across students. If you wanted to do well, you had to bring your own. The legit medical supply stores sold them, but the prices were stupid. Like $35 per tooth. Do the math. 28 teeth meant almost $1,000. I was barely keeping it together working evenings at a pizza joint, sometimes skipping meals just to cover rent and textbooks. My classmate Jake mentioned a guy he used last semester. Said the guy was solid, reliable, and cheap. He gave me a contact for someone named Med Supply Pro on an encrypted messaging app. I was hesitant, but Jake swore by him. Said he already passed his practicum thanks to that set. It felt shady, but not illegal. I figured if hospitals and funeral homes were involved, it had to be semi-legit, right? I messaged him that night. I just said I was a dental student looking for a full set. 28 teeth, all types, clean, no damage. He replied in under 5 minutes. He said he could send a full set for $400 and guaranteed professional extraction. When I asked about the source, he told me mortuary staff pulled them before cremation with consent from the families. Apparently, dental work has to come out anyway to avoid issues during the cremation process. It made sense. I didn't ask any more questions. He sent me 3 photos. Clean white teeth lined up in plastic vials with printed labels. UR1, LL6, LR3. All the dental coding was there. The containers looked just like what our instructors used. I asked how to pay. He said crypto only. I had a small crypto wallet left over from a classmate who got me into it the year before, so I transferred the money and gave him a P.O. box I had access to through a friend. He said it'd be there tomorrow. No tracking number. No signature required. I didn't sleep well that night, but I kept telling myself it was just medical supplies, not drugs or anything. The next afternoon, I checked the P.O. box during lunch. Sure enough, there was a small brown cardboard box. No markings, no return address. The label just said, "Educational Kit," and had my initials handwritten in block letters. It was lighter than I expected. I sat in my car outside the post office and opened it on the passenger seat. Inside was a vacuum-sealed bag with bubble wrap around 3 plastic vials. Each vial had a strip of white tape with the same dental codes I'd seen in the photos. I counted them, all 28, packed tightly. They looked exactly like the ones in the photos. No blood, no damage, nothing that would set off alarms. It was weird how clean they were. Too clean, maybe. I wrapped them back up and put the package in my backpack under my anatomy textbook. The next few days, I didn't think much about it. I used a few of the teeth for my prep models, and everything seemed fine. Our lab assistant even complimented my Class 2 cavity prep on tooth number 14. That night, Jake messaged me asking if I got my stuff. I said yeah, and thanked him again. He just sent back a thumbs up. About 4 days later, something weird happened. I got a message from Med Supply Pro. It wasn't a follow-up or a thank you. It was just one line. Need more soon? I stared at it for a few seconds. I hadn't mentioned needing more, and I hadn't reached out since the first deal. I replied, "Not right now, thanks." He sent smiley face, not the emoji. He literally typed the words. I didn't answer. The next morning, I noticed my front door mail slot had something jammed in it. I lived in a shared rental with two other guys, and we had a locked mailbox outside, so we never used the slot. I pulled it out. It was a thick white envelope taped shut. No name on it. Inside were 2 teeth in a Ziploc bag, no labels. Just loose. I held them up to the light. 1 molar, 1 canine. Both still had dried gum tissue around the roots, not cleaned, not stored properly. I wrapped them in toilet paper and flushed them. My hands were shaking a little, but I told myself someone was messing with me. Maybe Jake was pulling a prank. I didn't say anything to my roommates. I didn't message Med Supply Pro. I figured it'd be smarter to just leave it alone. A couple more days passed. Nothing else showed up. I stayed busy with clinic hours and didn't use any more of the teeth. They stayed in my locker at school. Then, on Sunday night around 10 p.m., I heard a knock at the back door. It was raining. Not storming, just a light drizzle. The back door opened into the shared laundry room. Nobody used it after dark. Too many bugs, and the motion light was broken. I froze in the living room. My roommates weren't home. I waited. Nothing. Just that one knock. Not even a second try. I turned off the TV and walked back slowly, barefoot on the tile. When I looked through the small window in the door, I saw nothing. Just darkness and a faint reflection of myself. I turned on the kitchen light so it would cast more light into the laundry room through the glass. Still nothing. Then I noticed something at the bottom of the door. A small package. Not an envelope this time. Just a clear plastic bag sitting flat against the door like it had been pushed through the gap underneath. I opened the door slowly. The bag was wet from the rain, but sealed. Inside was another tooth. Just one this time. A lower incisor by the looks of it. No label. No cleaning. It still had red tissue clinging to the root. The bag also had a scrap of paper inside. It was folded once, already damp. I brought it under the kitchen light and opened it. Just 4 words written in blue ink with shaky handwriting. You forgot this one. The teeth I'd bought looked perfect. Exactly what I needed for my exams. I used them in every lab session, cavity preps, crown fittings, root canals. No one questioned them. They passed inspection. I remember holding one premolar with tweezers and thinking how clean the root was, like it had never even been inside a mouth. I didn't care at the time. I just wanted to pass. My grades shot up. I scored near the top of the class on our practicals. The professor said my precision had improved. I didn't say a word about where the teeth came from. Neither did Jake. About a month later, Med Supply Pro messaged me again. Good results. Want to earn extra? I didn't answer at first. He sent another message the next day. We pay $150 per tooth. Just collect extras from clinic. I worked part-time at a dental clinic helping clean and sterilize instruments. Sometimes patients had extractions. Molars, wisdom teeth, most got thrown away. Still, the idea of collecting them for someone like him felt wrong. I told him no. He replied with a shrug emoji. I'll pay $70 each. Easy money, no one checks. I ignored it. He kept going. $100 per tooth. He said he'd pay up front. Then he started sending pictures, trays full of teeth. Small boxes with jawbone halves, vertebrae. One was a plastic bin filled with human ribs, no labels, just dumped in like meat. Then came organs, kidneys, a liver, even what looked like an eyeball in a jar. They were too fresh, no embalming, no discoloration. This wasn't old cadaver material. It was something else. The quantities were off too. Dozens of matched sets. Nobody would have that much access unless they were doing something illegal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the incisor he'd left on my back porch. You forgot this one. It had to be him. I hadn't told anyone where I lived. There were no cameras at the back entrance. I asked Jake again about him, but Jake just said he didn't want to get involved anymore. I could tell he regretted ever mentioning the contact. I started looking into it. I dug through old Reddit threads, dark web forums, anything I could find mentioning Med Supply Pro. Nothing direct. But after a few nights, I got a hit. Someone on a closed forum mentioned a guy named Marcus who sold cold-grade medical samples. I searched Marcus, teeth, in my city. I came across a local obituary database. Not related to him, but one of the guest book comments was signed by a Marcus Webb. The name stuck. I ran it through a public records site. There was a Marcus Webb working nights at the county morgue 2 miles from the university hospital. I sat on it for a day. Then I messaged him again. "Is your name Marcus Webb?" He read it, but didn't reply. 5 minutes later, he sent one message. "Be careful what you type." That was all. No emojis, no jokes. 10 minutes later, another message came through. "You're in deeper than you think. I have every message, every payment. You break this, I break you." I didn't reply. Then one more. "You think you're clean? You bought 28 teeth, paid in crypto, used them, and passed your exam. You're already part of this. Might as well benefit." Then he sent a photo of me sitting in my car outside the post office the day I picked up the first package. The photo had been taken from across the street. Not a security camera. Someone had been watching me. That same night, he sent a link. An encrypted, password-protected website. I opened it. Medical-grade layout, options to purchase, femurs, fibulas, jaw sets, lung tissue. Everything itemized with prices. Some were over $5,000. At the top it read, "Research institutions, welcome." Some listings were marked, "Rush available." He messaged again. "Earn $10,000 a month. You just collect, no question." I knew I had to stop it. I couldn't pretend anymore. I backed up all our messages, screenshots, payment history from my crypto wallet. I copied the website URL and its source code into a document. Then I submitted everything to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center and included my phone number. They responded in less than 24 hours. 2 agents came to my apartment. I showed them everything. They already had a case open on Marcus Webb. He was on their radar, but they hadn't connected the dental angle yet. I signed a cooperation agreement. They took my phone for imaging and told me not to contact him again. They traced the payments, the message logs, and the website host. Over the next few weeks, they raided 4 locations across 3 states. Marcus was arrested at the morgue while packaging tissue into a cooler. Along with him, 12 others were indicted. Mostly morgue workers, 1 funeral director, 1 former EMT. They'd been targeting homeless individuals and unclaimed bodies, forging disposal paperwork, and selling human remains to shady institutions, universities that looked the other way, and even private collectors. Some of the remains had been shipped overseas. I was called to testify during the trial. I sat in the courtroom while Marcus stared straight ahead. No expression. The prosecutor played the recordings and showed the jury the screenshots. When they read out the sentences, I didn't feel relief. Just numb. Marcus got 15 years in federal prison. The others got less. But the entire network was exposed. Back at school, no one knew. I passed my practicum and got my license. But I kept those last 2 teeth. The ones from the mail slot and the back door. I sealed them in a plastic container, marked the date, and locked them away. I've never used them. Every once in a while, I think about throwing them out. But I don't. Because every time I look at them, I remember someone died for my grades. Someone who never even got their name back. It started as a class assignment. I was finishing my last year of journalism school and needed a hard-hitting story for my investigative reporting seminar. Most of my classmates were writing about labor unions, local housing issues, or climate stuff. My professor, though, said that if I wanted to stand out, I should look into financial fraud. He tossed out a few names, but one stuck. Richard Blake. I'd never heard of him before, but apparently, he was a financial advisor in Chicago who disappeared in 2020 after stealing close to $12 million from his clients. The victims got some media attention, mostly retirees, small business owners, and people who trusted him. But no one ever found him. It was like he vanished. That intrigued me. I started where you'd expect. Court records, archived articles, SEC filings. I spent nights scrolling through old news reports, downloading legal documents from Pacer, and highlighting anything that felt off. The thing that stood out right away was how prepared Blake had been. Months before the investigation even began, he started offloading assets, closing accounts, and liquidating properties. It wasn't impulsive. He'd sold one of his lakefront houses just 2 weeks before the FBI got involved, transferred the money through shell companies, and moved everything into crypto. I mapped it out on my wall with sticky notes and red string like some cliché crime show. But it helped. I tracked down his ex-wife through a lead I found buried in a divorce settlement summary. She didn't say much, but she was bitter. Not just about the money, but about the way he manipulated people. What stood out most from our short call was when she mentioned that, starting in late 2019, he began taking Spanish lessons. She found travel guides to South America in his suitcase and a browser history showing searches like countries with no extradition treaty with the U.S. citizenship through investment Paraguay. That's when I realized he hadn't just fled. He had planned his exit years in advance. I spent the next few weeks digging deeper. I ran every email address, alias, and business name I could find through public databases and old data leaks. I found a string of wire transfers going to accounts in Mexico and Belize. Small amounts, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, but consistent enough to keep someone living modestly or to help build a new life somewhere no one would look. I scrolled through expat forums, read posts about Americans living off-grid in Central America, and kept coming across names that sounded vaguely familiar. Then, I found something. A photo from a charity gala in Mexico City in 2021. It was buried in a Facebook album containing hundreds of photos from a local event planner. One man in the background, with his arm around a politician and a drink in his hand, looked almost exactly like Blake. 10 years older, maybe. a beard. But the eyes were the same. I reverse image searched the photo and found more snapshots from fundraisers, beach cleanups, and even an adoption center ribbon-cutting ceremony in Guatemala. In all of them, he was never the center of attention, but he was always there, just outside the spotlight, always smiling. The charity angle didn't make sense at first. Blake had no history of philanthropy. If anything, he was known for flaunting his wealth, exotic cars, vacations to Mykonos, private clubs. But in these photos, he was shaking hands with local officials, dressed casually, and seemed to be heavily involved in youth-oriented organizations. I pulled up the names of the charities from the banners and logos in the background. Most were small NGOs focused on housing, education, and support for homeless children or orphans. I began reaching out. I sent polite emails, posing as a student journalist researching international youth outreach. Some didn't respond. A few did cautiously. One man from a small nonprofit in Oaxaca remembered Ricardo, a generous donor who always paid in cash and avoided cameras. Another person in Antigua, Guatemala, said their visitor, Rich, had promised to build a dormitory for teenage boys who'd aged out of the system. He said he wanted to give back, the woman told me during a WhatsApp call. But it felt more like observation. He watched them a lot. He was always asking about their stories, their families, and whether they had anyone back home. That word stuck with me. Observation. Another woman, this time from a youth shelter outside Guatemala City, agreed to talk. We spoke over video chat. She described a man with an American accent who'd visited multiple times in 2022, sometimes alone, sometimes with local police officers or businessmen. She said he had documents showing he was forming a new initiative for runaway support. He wanted to fund counseling, meals, and schooling. But he always asked for private interviews with the teenagers, especially the boys. She said no, of course. But once, she saw him talking alone with a 14-year-old near the courtyard. When she walked over, the boy looked down, and the man quickly walked away. He said he just wanted to learn about trauma, she told me. But he kept using strange phrases. He asked if some of the boys had disappeared before, like whether they came back after leaving. It gave me a bad feeling. I asked if she had a photo. She didn't. But one of her co-workers had saved a still image from the security camera after that visit, just in case. She emailed it to me. It was grainy and had been taken at night. But the man walking out of the building, tall, white, with a slight limp in his left leg, matched the other photos I had. He was carrying a folder under one arm and looking directly at the camera. I compared it with a DMV image from Blake's driver's license. It was him. This was no longer just a story about a fraudster hiding out in paradise. Something else was going on. The way people described him, the questions he asked, and the pattern of visiting shelters for vulnerable teenagers all felt wrong. I couldn't shake it. I started mapping his appearances and noting the timeline. He moved around a lot. Mexico City in 2021, then Belize, then rural Guatemala. Every time his name changed slightly. Rick, Ricardo, Rich. But it was always the same kinds of organizations. Shelters, youth centers, recovery homes. I booked a one-way ticket to Guatemala City. I stayed in a cheap guest house near the edge of the city, trying to keep a low profile. It wasn't a tourist area. Bare concrete buildings, narrow streets, dogs barking at all hours. My room had a small fan and a weak lock on the door. Every night, I backed up my notes to a password-protected drive and hid it under the mattress. During the day, I took local buses and tried to blend in. I used basic Spanish phrases to get by. I never said I was a journalist. I told people I was just a student working on a school project. Using Google Translate, I started digging through local Facebook groups, most of them written in slang-heavy Spanish, the kind you don't learn in a classroom. I saw dozens of posts about missing teenagers, many of them boys between 13 and 17. A few posts had blurry photos. One caught my attention, a man in sunglasses standing outside a schoolyard, surrounded by children. The caption said he'd offered modeling contracts to some girls after school. The comments were filled with angry replies and crying emojis. The post was a few months old. I zoomed in. The man's posture, his nose, even the way he tilted his head. It looked like Blake. I messaged the woman who posted it. Her name was Jessica. She replied the next day. Her cousin had gone missing that week. A 15-year-old boy named Luis, last seen talking to two American men outside a small youth center. They had offered him a job doing tech work in Belize. He never came home. Jessica said there were other stories like that. Girls and boys approached by foreigners and promised work in hotels or modeling jobs. Some were never seen again. Others came back weeks later, quiet and withdrawn, with bruises or signs of abuse. The deeper I went, the sicker I felt. With the help of an online translator, I tracked down local news articles. Many had vague headlines. Teen missing in Zone 18. Foreign man questioned by police. But reading between the lines, the pattern was clear. People were being recruited, moved across borders, and exploited. I began cross-referencing dates, locations, and charity events Blake had attended. Several matched the timelines of disappearances. I made a spreadsheet, color-coded by city and year. His path traced directly through areas with the highest numbers of missing youth cases. One night, while walking back to my room, I noticed a white pickup truck parked across the street. Two men sat inside. They weren't locals. They didn't look directly at me, but I could tell they were watching. I changed my route the next day. I sent everything I'd found to a burner email account I'd created specifically for the project. I also backed it up to a USB drive and mailed it to my classmate back home, just in case something happened. That's when I knew I was in over my head. I found an old news clip online, a press conference from 2021, in which an FBI agent briefly discussed Blake's fraud case. I tracked the agent down through LinkedIn. I messaged him and attached a few pieces of my research and several photos. At first, he ignored me. Then, 3 days later, he replied. "Call me now." He gave me a number. I used a phone at an internet cafe. He was sharp, direct, and skeptical at first. He asked how I'd found the photos and who I was. But when I started explaining the charity links and the local posts about missing teenagers, his tone changed. I sent him everything. The spreadsheet, the interviews, the still image from the shelter. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You need to stop. You're walking into a live investigation. We've had eyes on this guy for over a year. You could ruin months of work." I froze. Is he dangerous? Yes, and not just him. He didn't give me specifics, but he made it clear that this wasn't just about stolen money. Blake was part of something bigger, a network, a system that preyed on vulnerable children in places with little law enforcement oversight. He asked where I was staying, then told me to leave Guatemala within 48 hours. "You're not safe there," he said. "They watch people." I told him I still had more information, more leads. He said to send everything to a secure Dropbox folder he gave me, then delete it all from my devices. No exceptions. He thanked me and said my work might have helped move the investigation forward, but I needed to disappear. The next morning, someone knocked on my door around 6 a.m. I didn't answer. I just packed my things, slipped out through the back stairwell, and took a taxi to the airport. I paid cash. My hands shook as I went through security. Every tall man wearing sunglasses made my stomach twist. I didn't feel safe until the plane took off. Back in Chicago, I received a call 2 weeks later. It was the same agent. He said they'd made arrests, not just Blake, but 2 others connected to a child trafficking ring. My notes had helped them confirm several locations they'd been unsure about. Local police in Guatemala had coordinated with U.S. authorities to intercept them at a warehouse where 2 teenagers were being held. Blake had fake passports, hard drives, and cash on him. He tried to bribe the officers. The news broke fast. CNN ran a story about it. They called him the Predator Financier. The articles showed his mugshot. He looked older now, with a scar across his forehead. He faced multiple charges, including trafficking, child exploitation, fraud, and conspiracy. Prosecutors were pushing for a life sentence. The FBI never used my name publicly, but I received an encrypted email from one of the international crimes investigators. He said my research had filled gaps they couldn't cover through official means. They'd spent years trying to crack the network. My digging, small as it was, had helped map out Blake's operation. My professor called me the next week. He said he'd known something bigger might be buried in the Blake story. That was why he'd pointed me toward it. "Sometimes the thread you pull unravels the whole sweater," he said. I still think about the children, the ones who never came back. The ones who did, but came back changed. Journalism classes don't prepare you for that part. They teach structure, sources, and ethics, but not how to sleep after reading first-hand accounts of abuse. Not how to walk away when you know there's more out there. But I also learned something else. Real reporting, the kind that matters, can expose people who hide in plain sight. Blake wore suits, gave speeches, smiled for cameras, and underneath it all, he was a predator. I turned in my final paper 2 days before the deadline. 30 pages. Clean and focused, with no names that could put anyone in danger. My professor gave me an A. I didn't ask for a letter of recommendation. I already knew I wouldn't be going into newsroom work. I started looking for jobs in nonprofit investigations instead. The kind of work that finds people like Blake before they can disappear again.